Alright, let me show you one Docker mistake that can waste days. So I'm working inside a monorepo called Nonware. It's monorepo called Nonware. And at the root level, I have a Docker compose file. Then inside that project, I have two main folders, a backend folder for Django and a web folder for the front end. Each one has its own Dockerfile, and the root compose file is supposed to bring everything together. Here, I have a backend folder, I have my Docker compose file, and I have a web folder. Inside my backend folder, I have a Dockerfile, and inside my web folder, I also have a Dockerfile. So structurally, this is clean. The root compose file, the backend Dockerfile, and the web Dockerfile. Everything looks organized, everything looks correct. But then I tried to build and run the app, and boom, Django is not installed. Now, that error makes no sense at all. Traceback error, couldn't import Django. Because when you check the backend Docker file, it looks fine, it installs dependencies, it sets up the app, so it should work. Then you check my Docker compose file, and it also looks fine, services are defined, ports are mapped, everything seems normal. So the question is, if the Docker file is correct and Docker compose looks correct, why is Django still missing? Here's the catch. Your Docker file and Docker compose file are supposed to work together, not compete, not overwrite each other in the wrong way, not silently cancel each other out. And in my case, that was exactly the problem. The image was being built correctly, but the Docker compose mounted my local backend folder into the container with the volume. So if you look at my backend service, I am mounting my backend folder onto my app, which is my working directory in my image, and that should also be in my container. Now the image was built correctly, but then Docker compose mounted my local backend folder into the container with the volume. So instead of using the fully prepared environment from the image, the container started seeing my post-project files directly. That kind of setup will create weird mismatches. Your image says one thing, your mounted files say another thing. Your dependencies may exist in one environment, but not where the running container is actually located. So in essence, while my Docker file creates its own virtual environment and uses my app/.ven/bin path, since my backend is mounted as a volume onto the working directory, which is my app, when my container is running, it's seeing a different thing from what my image created. Well, that's how you end up staring at an error. Django is not installed, even though you swear you already installed it. I swear to God. Well, I spent a ridiculous amount of time debugging this. I checked the Docker file, checked the compose file, checked dependency files, checked the Docker ignore. I was blaming the Docker ignore over and over again. I checked the build context over and over. And the real issue was simple. Docker wasn't broken. My configuration was fighting the soul. That's the lesson. Be careful with your Docker file and your Docker compose file. They should complement each other, not fight each other. Because if they don't, you spend 1 month building the software and another month coming while developing, testing, production. So whenever Docker behaves strangely, don't just ask, is my Docker file correct? Also ask, is my Docker compose overriding the exact thing my Docker file was prepared? That question can save a lot of things. Thanks.